What's up guys, it's Josh from StartReplay.com here, and I'm checking out F1 2017. I'm with Lee Mather, the creative director from Codemasters. F1 2017 will be Codemasters' 9th F1 game. Geez, that's a lot. That's a lot of games. Much like FIFA, which has a new game every single year, where do the team and yourself find inspiration to keep each iteration exciting and fresh, I guess?
So, we always look to do the strongest representation of the sport we can, and the sport does change fairly regularly. When you look over the years that we've had it since 2010, our first title, there's been new tracks brought in, there's been major rule changes, there's been lots of driver changes, there's been totally huge tech changes, so all of those things give us a lot to think about. We've also looked at ways of representing the sport more thoroughly, so not just the on-track experience, but also the environments that we create away from the track, some of the characters we add to the game. And also, now this year, looking at the history of the sport as well. So this year we considered that the 2017 cars were going to be record-breaking cars in terms of performance. So what better to do than to compare them to some of the fastest cars in previous Formula One history, with the icons that we've included in this year's game.
F1 2016 was praised across the board for its strong career mode. How would you say the career mode in this one has improved, and what changes do fans have to look forward to the most?
Yeah, so I think what we did last year we felt was a really good stepping stone for us. It was a good start. It was a little bit linear, but it gave the player that investment, that drive to want to progress and move through their career. So this year we've expanded that massively. So we've now got a totally separate RPG sort of style R&D system where the player has to work on developing the elements of the car. And it's not just about performance, it's also about reliability, which becomes key because of the fact that the engine and gearbox management is also in there, and we take that down to a really granular level. So you have each of the individual components of the power unit to worry about, and they all wear differently at different rates based on how you drive, what's happening to your racing. So if you're overheating the engine, for example, a certain component will take more wear than another. The knock-on effect could be it causes damage to something else. So you find yourself in between races really giving some consideration for what you're going to upgrade on that car and how you're going to go about your. I reached Monaco in a career playthrough recently and decided to run some worn components because I knew I would perform badly at Monaco anyway. It was wet, and I thought I don't need the power in the wet, and it gave me a good position. I got a few points out of it. It was good enough for that race, knowing that I could go to the next race, new components, nice and fresh, full power, off you go.
As an amateur F1 player myself, to me, the number one thing I find a bit daunting is the control scheme. How accessible is F1 2017 to a newcomer or someone who has struggled with the controls or the series in the past?
So as soon as you start your career, the first thing you'll be addressed with as you go through it is we've got prompts that allow you to understand not only what you're doing in the game, but also things that we've derived from the world of Formula One. So you'll be prompted to understand what the DRS is, or what you're supposed to do during a practice session. And then once you're into the game and on track, we've also got a good suite of assists for the player to turn on, so you can obviously make the driving experience, the on-track experience, that little bit easier for yourself. And also, because we've got the upgrades and the R&D, the engineer can give you some advice on those as well. So if you're not sure on which areas of the car are the weaker areas, as you're not completely clear on how Formula One cars work, the R&D guy can recommend a part or an area of the car that you should be working on. So for people who don't understand those things, they can still take those elements of the game on board, but also be sort of their hand held a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's going to be me for a lot of the time. As I've already said to you before this interview, I'm going into it a bit blind, and the last time I played an F1 game was on the N64 against my granddad. And all I remember is great memories of playing with my granddad, but terrible memories of struggling with the controls. And obviously back then it was a whole different era and we didn't have all the technological advancements that we have today. The last time classic cars were introduced were back in F1 2013. Now, finally, they're making a comeback in F1 2017 with 12 models that have been specifically selected. Can you tell me a bit about why they're only making a return now?
Well, last year the focus was on the career, building out that huge career. We put a lot of effort into the game that we built from 2015 up to 2016. This year, again, the focus was on building that career out. But as I said earlier on, the fact that this year the records were going to get broken, we wanted to do some sort of a comparison. And that's why we've included the cars we have. They're modern icons of Formula One. They all offer a very different driving experience, different weights, different power delivery, different powertrains. They're very, very different. So that's why we thought this year was a really good time to include them.
Now for a few questions from some fans. In screenshots and footage so far, the cars have had the Melbourne spec liveries, so no large driver numbers on the cars. Given that the regulations to have much larger, more visible driver numbers only came in mid-season, is this something that the team might be willing to patch into the game?
So, as we've done in previous years, we're planning to do post-launch patches that include visual changes to the cars. We obviously give all the teams the option that we'll change anything they want us to change on their cars to bring them into line. We obviously want to bring them into line so the game stays as authentic as possible. So that's definitely planned for post-launch.
What modes do you have for multiplayer? And in the future, do you maybe consider having a championship mode, which is co-op, perhaps?
So we've got the savable championship, which we had last year, so players can actually race together and save their progress and championship together. In terms of the R&D, that's a mammoth system to try and bring into the online game this year. Certainly something we'd like to look at for the future. But we've also this year opened up the spectator slots, so for people who want to stream the game and then commentate over it, you can now view from 2 spectator slots. But also we've tried to open it up to the more casual side as well by in the public lobbies, giving some incentive for being better drivers, for being cleaner drivers. You gain XP, you earn championship stars that you can, showcase in the lobby. People will see how you're performing, and hopefully it'll give people that incentive to clean up their online racing.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, the only other Codemasters game which I'm recently familiar with in terms of driving is Dirt 4. And when you're online, people are just thrashing it around the course and just bouncing off the sides of the track in order to get a good time. So it's going to be really interesting for myself, especially as an amateur, to get in online, see how people react to my driving ability and how I progress moving forward. Another question from a fan from a user named Bungle Sparky. With drivers like Bruno Senna and Paul di Resta showing how thin the line is between success and failure as a driver, what elements have you put into gameplay that get that difficulty and success across? That's quite a question.
Yeah, I mean, it depends if you're referring to the player or to the AI drivers themselves. So from a player perspective, obviously we've got a contract system in the game, and depending on how you choose to start your career experience, you may go in with one of the top teams where the expectation is you win. If you're not winning, you're going to lose your position, you're going to have to move to another team. If you're in one of the lower teams, your ambition is to maybe start upgrading the car, maybe getting some points, maybe getting through to the next round of qualifying. Also, as I say, developing the car becomes key at that point, but you may be looking for another contract. So, you need to look at your rating amongst the other teams. So there's so many elements that the player has to consider in a similar vein to that. For example, if you're not putting in the results, it may be, your team won't have unrealistic expectations of you. But if you're not hitting their expectations, then yeah, you could be out on your ear.